I'm making what's called a tonneau cover for my truck. It's just a cover for the bed of the truck. Keeps the elements out, protects stuff that might be stored inside there. What I'm going to be doing is using a process called the poor man's fiberglass. Fiberglass can be expensive. This is a cheaper alternative, and it provides a weatherproof option for you at low cost. This is going to be the poor man's fiberglass. And what we're using is just simple drop cloth. Got this from Harbor Freight Tools, and Titebond II glue. Essentially all you do to make this fiberglass, and then you put a coat on the thing that you're going to cover, and then you lay over your fabric, and you could use an old sheet, something like that. But because of what I'm using this for, I just wanted it to be a little bit extra durable. Now this is gonna probably soak up a lot of the glue and stuff, so I might go through. I will see how much of this I go through. And then you lay this over, smooth it out. Once it dries, sand it down lightly. Put another coat on. Once that dries, sand it down again. Once that dries, sand it again. And then you put 2 coats of paint on, sanding in between. And by the time that's finished, you should have a very smooth surface. A smooth, hard, durable surface that'll be waterproof. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this to size. I'm going to drape it over the wood here. And I'm actually going to iron it out. That way, these kind of creases in here don't show up. And again, you'll have a very smooth fabric, a very smooth surface, I should say, at the end. Okay, with the canvas ironed, what I'm going to do is fold back the canvas about halfway, a little bit more, and I'm going to apply a coat of glue onto the surface. And then I'm going to fold the canvas back over the top of it, press it down smooth, and then do the other side. And then we'll go over the top of the canvas with another layer of glue. And it's easiest just to take the glue and pour it out onto the surface. I have tried to use a paintbrush with this, and it actually is much stickier to apply. So what I use is a plastic scraper and just smooth out the glue onto every bit of surface. Gives it much more even coverage, and it makes it a heck of a lot easier to apply. You're also going to want to get right along the edges here as well, because you want the canvas to stick to the sides too. And you end up pulling it in, pushing it with this scraper to smooth it out and make sure it adheres well. Now, you don't want like too thick of a coating, but you definitely want a generous coating, because it's going to make the canvas become like a skin with this wood, because it's going to absorb into the wood. The glue is. The fibers are pulled into the wood itself. Okay, with half the board covered, now I'm going to take the fabric and pull it back over. Now you don't have to really pull it tight. What you do now is you just take the scraper and smooth out the fabric. And do the same thing along the sides. And just pull it taut and then smooth it out. Now I'm going to repeat the process on the second half. Fold the canvas back, put the glue down, put the canvas back, and smooth it out. And now it's ready to have the canvas pulled back over it. That's your first layer of protection in making your poor man's fiberglass. Now what I'm going to do is add a layer or a coating of glue over the top of this. Just going to start spreading it over the top. And again, you want to have good coverage here. Not too much, but you want every pore of the fabric filled. Because that's going to give you your protection. This first layer does take more glue than subsequent layers because it's absorbing into the fabric, obviously. The next layer should be go on much smoother. For the edging here, I use a brush, and that way I can paint it on and make sure I can also ensure that I got the rounded over part there. And now I take the scraper and scrape across. Now that the first coat has been applied, the fabric, it's tacky, and so that means it's adhering to the board. Now you can let this dry for a couple of hours and then come back and put the second coat on. I'm impatient, I don't like to wait. So what I'm going to use is a heat gun. This makes quick work of the drying process. I have it on high heat, and I just constantly move the gun back and forth over the surface. Of course, if you leave it in one section, not only will it possibly burn the fabric, but it could cause this to bubble, which we don't want, obviously. And as you can see, I'm getting pretty close to the fabric. That's not a problem, but just make sure you keep the gun moving, and you'll probably be able to see it change color as it dries. Already this is dry to the touch, and I'm just moving the gun back and forth in like 6-inch increments. I'm going to finish up the rest of the top, and I'll go along the sides as well and get that. First coat is dry, and along the edges it's dried too. So now what I'm going to do is I'm taking a sanding block. I'm not sure what the grit is. It's pretty fine though, and I'm just going to take this and I'm going to run it over the top of the entire board like this. This will allow the next layer to grip onto the first, and also it smooths out the finish. If you feel where I just did that very light sanding and then compare it to over here, this is pretty rough. This is a little bit smoother. And as you build up the layers, because after the next layer of glue, we'll be putting on 2 layers of paint. That'll give you all of your protection, plus you'll have a fairly smooth finish at the end. So now, just going to go through the entire board and give it a light sanding. Okay, now it's ready for the second coat of glue. So I've got the glue again, and once more, just gonna pour some out. Now this should smooth on a lot easier because it's not absorbing as much into the fabric. The second layer should go on a lot faster also than the first. So just as before, I did the edges as well, pushed in the, smoothed down the sides with the scraper. But unlike before where I used the heat gun on it, I'm actually gonna let this set overnight and let it dry, so I'm not gonna bother using the heat gun on it. And let it fully cure before I apply the first coat of paint. Before I apply the paint on this side, tomorrow I'll flip it over and we'll end up gluing down this side to the underneath.
Tomorrow.
Before we flip it over and glue up the opposite side, these edges, I'm going to take our sanding pad and I'm going to quickly go over the top. Now we can turn the board over. And this is essentially the same process as before. Put a band of glue all the way around the edge. We don't need to do in the center. And we'll press the fabric in just as we did before. Then we'll put a coat on top, let that dry, and then put another coat again. And then this will be attached to the bottom as well. And now we'll just take this and we'll press it down into the glue. And then we'll come back with the scraper and make sure the fabric is pressed down into the glue and smoothed out. Just like before, we're going to apply glue over the top, and I like to spread it over the edge of the fabric so that it adheres and seals in the edges. Now we'll put down the next coat of glue on top. This is fully dried and cured. So now we're going to start painting, and we'll start on this side since it's here. So what I have here is just a can of exterior grade paint that I have left over from a fence project. So I've just been using this because this is just the base coat for what's going to be on top. With the first coat on, now we'll use the heat gun again to go around and speed dry the paint. Paint is all dry here. Now on the back side here, I only do one coat of this base coat. There's going to be a top coat put on. It's going to cover all the wood too, but I only put a one coat on this side because it's really not, shouldn't get very wet on this side anyway, and it will have another protective layer put on top, but it's only on the other side, on the top side, that I'll put two coats on. Now, once again, we'll use the heat gun to speed dry the paint. And now with the first coat dry, we'll take our sanding block and we'll again go over it to smooth it out. All right, and now we're ready for the next coat. The second coat is on, and just like the second coat of glue, I prefer to let this one dry itself and fully cure before putting on the final protective coat. What I'll be using is truck bed liner. This is a gallon picked up at Harbor Freight Tools. It's like $50 for the can, a little pricey, but I think it'll give a good protection. But with 20% off, it was like 40 bucks. Going to sand it down smooth one more time. It's already very, very smooth as it is, but one more time because it gives the next layer good adhesion. Now I'm using this because this is obviously going to be the tonneau cover for my truck, but if you're going to use this technique for anything else, you can use the paint colors that you applied beforehand. They can be your final paint colors. I'm using this basically as a primer, but you could use them as your actual color that you're going to paint whatever it is you're using this on. And instead of putting a truck bed liner on, you could coat it with a polyurethane coating if you wanted, for that extra level of protection. The truck bed liner has been applied. It says to let dry for 1 to 2 hours and then come back and apply a second coat. This should provide a durable coat, and we'll see how it holds up. We'll let this dry for a couple hours. Then we'll come back and paint the other side.
So that's the process of how you'd do a poor man's fiberglass. As I said, you wouldn't have to go to the trouble of putting on the truck bed liner. Your paint would be the final protection you needed on the piece that you're working on, and it would provide a weatherproof cover for you. All right, if you like what you see, give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel if you'd already do so. That way you'll be notified right away when videos like this are posted. Okay, thanks for watching.